This week, I was required to present myself as a potential participant in federal jury duty at the Dirksen Federal Center in downtown Chicago. And I was reluctant, but I did because it's our civic duty to show up for these kinds of things. And it was very interesting to hear their presentation on serving and the process of serving and some of the guidelines and parameters of that service. And in the video they shared with us about serving, they talked about how it's best if we don't, actually, it's required that we don't do any investigation of our own, that we don't pursue any information about the case or bring any of our personal biases. We simply weigh in on what's presented to us and in the way it's presented, and then following the instructions of the judge instead of interpreting or adding anything to the program. They told us to simply follow the rules. They also asked us to participate in a COVID test, which they assured us would not be collecting our DNA. And then they proceeded to present the test, explaining to us that it was the latest technology in DNA testing. And they wonder why we're all conspiracy theorists. Welcome to Conservative Coffee Hour. I'm Stanley Smith. I don't think we're all conspiracy theorists, but we like to think we're open-minded, and we're trying to navigate the very strange political times and world events that are unfolding all around us. Each week we look at a topic or a candidate or litigation or policy to try to see, cut through all the triggers and find out what's really going on. This week I also squeezed in a seminar on the Safety Bill, which is the no cash bail bill, which will be instituted here in Illinois and in other states in the new year. And it was presented by a speaker, Madeline Baer, who was, I will say, very well versed in the whole legal system and all the different bills and all the different laws already on the books for victims' rights, law enforcement, litigation, quite extensive knowledge she had on all the topic. But the safety bill, she explained to us, was the idea of moving from a monetary-based system to a more justice-based system. And I think, in theory, that sounds pretty good. And in listening to her explain the bill, I think you could hear it as a protecting our rights. If we're arrested, we certainly want to have the benefit of the doubt and have access to fair and even-handed treatment. So a couple different takeaways. I was impressed that there are so many laws on the books already, which probably cover almost everything in this current bill, and it's really more of a way to manage outcomes, is what I was hearing in it. But also, she shared that this bill in other states has been advanced by Republican and conservative groups. So it's a mixed message of Democrat, Republican. It really isn't a partisan situation. It's more of a philosophical debate. But we're not hearing that. Instead, we're hearing the "set your hair on fire" rhetoric from both sides. It's really a trigger, and they're using that to just motivate us and to enrage us and to drive us into one of those responses. And Annie or Gramone mentioned a few weeks ago that we have our different responses from our very base consciousness self of the fight, flight, or shut down. And all these narratives, depending on your personality, it's going to be one of those three triggers, and that's going to motivate you to some kind of action or some kind of negative outcome, or to shut down. And probably need to rise above all three of those and take a step back and see what's really going on. Last week, Larry shared with us a particular nuance, which I thought was probably something we could call a nugget, if we're looking for nuggets of insight or wisdom amongst all the blur of triggers. Larry's been sharing for a number of months, actually, the idea that we need to vote early. And I think that's been kind of an unappealing notion to some of us, but Larry added this important nuance, and that was the idea that if we vote early, that then we will have the energy of the experience to carry into conversations with others, because we will have been to the polling place, we will have seen the ballot, we will have filled out the ballot, we will have read it and made our selections, and we can carry that experience, the energy of that experience, into talking about it with others. So I thought that was a good suggestion, but also it was a good example of rising above the rhetoric. Instead of trying to instill fear in us about voting early or voting on election day or not voting on election day and voting early, just simply explain to us, maybe at a higher level motivator, that it can be a positive experience and you can carry the positive energy to others instead of carrying anger, frustration, and a negative outlook on it. As I said, each week we take a look at a different topic. We have Barbara Palmer, who is she's circling in on us, and Barbara Palmer is a defense attorney for defendants in the January 6th Capitol event, and she is going to try to land here at Conservative Coffee Hour. And we also have Sue Liu from the Falun Gong, who is hoping to join us this week or next to talk about the Falun Gong experience in China. And Larry was trying to push my buttons on why we need to hear from the Falun Gong. And I think it's an example of, again, rising above the talking point triggers to the larger picture. And the larger picture of the Falun Gong experience in China was that they're a spiritual group that became very popular, and it represented a certain number. And once that number is seen as a threat by the government, it really doesn't matter if it's for good or for bad. The government's probably going to take notice of it and try to shut that down. This week I reached out to my friend Ella, who lives in Russia, to find out what is her take on recent events in Russia, and most specifically Mr. Putin's speech about the annexation of parts of Ukraine. And Ella explained to me that we really can't call or talk about Russia as just a monolithic entity. In the same way, you really can't talk about Ukraine as a monolithic entity, just like the United States. We have many different states. Ella pointed out that when the Soviet Union collapsed, in theory, the Soviet Union could have broken into many, many individual states, because each area and region is so specialized and localized, often with their own language and dialect. Similar to the Ukraine, it's about half of it consists of Russian-speaking people, and she mentioned that when President Zelensky was elected president, he actually had to hire a tutor and an interpreter because he only spoke Russian, not Ukrainian. He was the president of Ukraine and didn't even speak the language. Ella said that she has gotten notice from the State Department, because she has dual citizenship, that she should probably leave the country, but she's going to stay in Russia because she doesn't believe there's any particular danger for her at this time. But in reading Mr. Putin's address and in talking to Ella, I was impressed upon the idea that very similar narratives going on in Russia as we have here. Ella mentioned that the young people seem completely disconnected and removed from really a general awareness of the severity of the state taking over and giving up control to the state. And she said that in Russia, people refer to young people as snowflakes and bunnies. I recently had a friend who visited Ukraine for animal welfare relief, and she remarked a similar idea, shared a similar idea, that people there also refer to young people as basically know-nothings and asleep. So, interesting to know. Ella also shared that in the public school system, they really don't teach the nuances of history any longer in Russia. They don't share some of the social, political history of the nation, which might inform some of these young people more on some of these topics. So it's just, again, an interesting nuance. When we rise above the triggers and their hair on fire, we can take a step back and actually engage with people and learn from people and talk to people in a sane and rational manner. I don't think any of us here at Conservative Coffee Hour is saying that it's all puppy dogs and lollipops here. I think we all do know that we're in serious, serious trouble here. But keeping our heads cool and not being led into a potential bad situation or trap or being manipulated into taking action in a way that's probably going to set us back and maybe impede us from the progress we need to make. So I do like to offer each week who will be joining us this week, but I guess this week it'll be a surprise. It's either going to be Barbara Palmer or Sue Liu, but either way, I do hope that we'll be able to discover some nuggets, some gems of information, center ourselves, and navigate the storm that we've all found ourselves in at this time. If you would like to join us at Conservative Coffee Hour is every Saturday at 10 a.m. Central Time on Zoom. I will include my email in the description of this video. I'll be happy to send you an invitation. And I look forward to seeing you very, very soon.